I now have a responsibility to my son and to my wife, just like I do my teammates. I spend all my time being a quarterback, and I need to find people that I can trust and rely upon. Deseret First Credit Union, they are those people that are spending all that time to help me manage and take care of my family. My name is Taysom Hill, and my why is faith, family, and football.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
And the final cleanup of a crash on the on-ramp to northbound I-15 at Layton Parkway in Davis County. It looks like we may have some trouble in traffic on southbound I-15 in Midvale. A few vehicles over to the right shoulder after 7200 south, and we've had heavy and slow traffic into Murray from there. UDOT traffic alert. Plan ahead for weekend traffic delays and lane closures on I-15 between Ogden and Marriott Slaterville. Crews are repairing pavement on several bridges in the area through September. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, hot and dry through the weekend. High of 102 today, 103 on Saturday. And we'll see monsoon moisture moving in starting on Monday with cooler temperatures and a chance of rain. Right now, 97 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We've covered a lot of late about what is happening in Israel, reforms to the judiciary, separation of power challenges, protests in the street. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sat down with CNN's Wolf Blitzer to discuss his country's judicial reforms. Many have said these reforms would overhaul the system and end democracy in Israel. But what did Bibi Netanyahu have to say about it? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we have been discussing, the turmoil in Israel continues. The Knesset, the governing body, voted on some of these judicial reforms, which many have said will really end that important separation of powers between the judiciary and the legislative branches there. And remember, Israel doesn't have a written constitution, so things are a little different than we like to think of them here in the United States under our written document. But yesterday, clearly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has taken to the charm and communication offensive, even here in the United States. He sat down with Wolf Blitzer, and he stated emphatically that the goal is to have an independent Supreme Court, but not one that is too powerful.
Well, first of all, we're not trying to weaken the Supreme Court. We're trying to bring balance between the three branches of government, which is the essence of democracy. In Israel, over the last 20, 30 years, the Supreme Court arrogated a lot of the powers of the judiciary and the executive. They can basically nullify any decision made. That doesn't happen anywhere on the planet. And so we're trying to bring it back in line. And we don't want a subservient court. We want an independent court, but not an all-powerful court.
So those are important principles to make sure that we get to. You don't want to have a court that has amassed too much power, that is, quote, legislating from the bench. You also don't want to have a court that is eviscerated and can be overturned by the ruling body, the Knesset, on a whim. So the Prime Minister went on to say that the court has a lot of checks, but not a lot of balances. And he gave a very particular example. Take a listen.
The court can nullify a decision, any decision by the government, by the executive, by saying it's unreasonable. Not because it's illegal, not because they're using other checks that they have, plenty of things that they could do. They can nullify an appointment. It's like the Supreme Court would be able to nullify an appointment by President Biden, not by saying that there's a conflict of interest, that exists today in Israel, that it's undue process, that exists today in Israel, that it's not proportional, that exists in Israel, but just by saying, we don't think this appointment is reasonable. That doesn't exist in America. It doesn't exist in most democracies, not to this scope. And that's the minor correction that we made that is now called the end of democracy. If that's the end of democracy, there are no democracies because none of them have this.
Very persuasive from Benjamin Netanyahu. He knows how to navigate this conversation. And really important. So, because Israel does not have a written constitution, this idea of the reasonableness doctrine is what a lot of decisions are made on, what is reasonable and what is right for the country. So Netanyahu explained that what they've done in this judicial reform package is to trim back some of the reforms so that they are reasonable, that they are rational. Here's how he explained it.
This reform, let's tell the truth. We've trimmed it. We've listened to the concerns of the opposition and broad spectrum of the public. I think they're wrong in a lot of things, but I think they have points, important points. So we trimmed it down to a minor thing on reasonableness. We're trying now to achieve, I gave a push the pause button on the legislation in which I had a majority. For 3 months, tried to negotiate with the opposition. They wouldn't agree to anything, even a minor change.
So as you go through all of that, of course, we've had Amos Gior from the University of Utah, who has been on the streets in Israel as part of those protests and talking about opposition to these changes that have been passed. Now, here's the interesting thing. So those changes, again, passed by the Knesset, but the current Supreme Court in Israel does get a chance to look them over. They don't often weigh in on a lot of things that are passed by the Knesset, but this time they might. And then it goes on to the president, which is much more of a ceremonial role in Israel for a final signature. And so there's still a lot up in the air, and there's some interesting questions. Wolf Blitzer took it to the international stage and said, look, clearly there are people in the United States that are very worried about these reforms and these changes, this separation of powers and checks and balances. Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked about what he thought with President Biden not inviting him to the White House for a state dinner, which he has done with others, and of course, which he did with the Israeli president not too long ago.
As a result of what you're doing, Mr. Prime Minister, the Biden administration has said, and this was very blunt, you're not invited to come to the White House. They say you'll meet President Biden in the fall somewhere else in the United States. Isn't that a very significant sign that U.S.-Israel relations right now are suffering big time because of your policies?
Well, first of all, President Biden spoke to me the other day, and he said specifically that he's inviting me to the White House.
The Prime Minister also pointed out in his response to that, he said, look, the United States is having some pretty interesting and pretty heated debates of their own when it comes to the power of the Supreme Court.
Israel is a democratic country. It has an internal debate. You have an internal debate in the United States right now about the powers of the Supreme Court, about whether it's abusing its power, whether you should curtail it. I'm not going to enter into that debate. Does that make the American democracy not a democracy? Does that make that debate unworthy? Does that make that issue a symbol of the fact that you're moving to some dictatorship? Of course not.
So some pretty important points brought up by Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think it's, again, one of those, we do have a lot of debates going on in the U.S. right now. So I think it's a pretty smart communication strategy for Mr. Netanyahu to play into that and say, look, the U.S. is having a lot of pretty heated debates. Many are talking about packing the court, adding more seats to the court, putting age limits on the court. We've talked about a whole series of ethics reforms, both inside the court and those that Congress would like to enforce on the court. So there are a lot of debates. There's also a lot of debates about what is the proper role of the court. And so that's actually a good thing. I actually think it was right that Netanyahu pointed out the fact that there are these kinds of debate. That's a good thing. It's what we do moving forward that actually matters. So in September, Israel's court will hear appeals to this law, and the Supreme Court could strike it down. So Wolf Blitzer asked Netanyahu if he'll abide by the court's ruling either way.
Well, look, we'll go into uncharted territory, and I really would like to believe that they won't do that. And the reason is that, first of all, we're all subject to the rule of law. The Prime Minister is subject to the rule of law. The Knesset, our parliament, is subject to the rule of law. The judges are subject to the law. Everybody is subject to the law. Now, the closest thing we have to a constitution are basic laws. That's what we're dealing with. And what you're talking about is a situation, a potential situation, where in American terms, the United States Supreme Court would take a constitutional amendment and say that it's unconstitutional. That's the kind of the kind of spiral that you're talking about, and I hope we don't get to that.
Bibi Netanyahu clearly knows his U.S. history as well as he does his Israeli history, and so we will continue to watch that play out. It will be in September when the Supreme Court in Israel will hear this bill that was passed by the Knesset that would change and really curtail and limit that separation of powers and the authority of the court. That's really important. Now, there's also something else to think again about today as it relates to Israel, and that is that President Biden is wrestling with whether to pursue the possibility of a U.S.-Saudi mutual security pact. This pact would involve Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel. Provided that Israel makes concessions to the Palestinians, that would preserve the possibility of a two-state solution. So President Biden has dispatched Mr. Sullivan to Saudi Arabia. They actually arrived there yesterday, Thursday morning, to explore the possibility of some kind of U.S., Saudi, Israeli, Palestinian understanding. That's a whole nother level of think again, and we'll continue to follow it all.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Why do people call KSL Utah's news, traffic, and weather station? Well, every day you get a ton of news.
The U.S. economy beat expectations.
A road rage encounter was caught on video.
Some elementary schools forced to close.
You also hear important traffic updates.
Right lanes blocked due to road repair.
And reliable weather.
Triple digits through Sunday, hot weekend.
Use this radio station for all of it. We're KSL News Radio on every smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM.
Now, I have a confession to make. When I saw the roster for this year's productions at Hale Center Theater, they all look great. But the one that jumped off the page for me, it's a family favorite for the right family, and it was Newsies. It is absolutely delightful. But here's the bad news. It is completely sold out. But there's a silver lining. The good news is Hale Center Theater is adding 4 p.m. matinees. Newsies is running through August 26th. If you thought you had missed your chance to see this great, enthusiastic production at Hale Center Theater, there's still time to get your matinee tickets. And don't forget, too, just around the corner is Catch Me If You Can, Around the World in 80 Days, and just in time for the holiday season, Elf, the musical. It's time to go to hct.org. Lock down your tickets, especially get your tickets for Newsies. That's hct.org, Hale Center Theater.
I can't wait for what's next. Even with higher stroke risk due to atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Eliquis, apixaban tablets, reduces stroke risk. It's the #1 cardiologist-prescribed blood thinner.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without talking to your doctor, as this may increase your risk of stroke. Eliquis can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or have antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding or unusual bruising, or if you have tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. It may increase your bleeding risk if you take medicines such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance. For your free quote, call SelectQuote at 1-800-330-1991. That's 1-800-330-1991. Or go to SelectQuote.com. That's 1-800-330-1991. SelectQuote. We shop, you save. Full details on example policies at selectquote.com/commercials.
Smart, connected, modern. Discover life-enhancing independent living services at Trio South Ogden. They do things a little differently there because you're different. With everything you need to support your best self, you'll find that joy isn't just for the young, it's for the young of heart. Trio South Ogden's signature programs provide a unique approach to wellness that brings living well and well-being to life. To learn more, contact Trio South Ogden at 801-475-4004 or visit triosouthodden.com.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Tim and Amanda.
If this is the first time you've ever joined us, can we just say welcome, welcome? I hope you come back and see us again. Tim and I have been doing this for a long time, and we love what we do. But the best part of what we do always and will always be connecting with you.
How many times do we say people don't understand how much information and really love we get from that side of the radio?
Yes.
They thank us for giving it to them, but we get it back so many times.
Wake up with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda, 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, working outdoors in the heat can significantly increase the risk of a fatal heart attack. Second, geologists are learning about what's beneath Utah's West Desert with help of swarms of small earthquakes. Third, President Biden took a trip to Maine today to talk about the country's improving economy. Right now, 97 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Of course, one of the biggest political stories in Utah is the special election for Congressional District 2. Chris Stewart, of course, is stepping down in September. We currently have 3 Republican candidates on the ballot for the primary. And we've talked to the other 2 on this show, and now we're very excited to have Celeste Malloy, who was the Republican nominee coming out of the Republican Party convention for the 2nd Congressional District, and she joins us on the line now to chat about the campaign. Celeste, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Boyd.
So give us a little lay of the land. You obviously, this is a if ever there was a drink out of a fire hose and a mad sprint, this has to be it. But give us a little sense of what you're seeing, what you're experiencing out there as you try to do this mad dash.
A mad sprint is probably a good description, but I'm finding that I really enjoy it. I like standing in front of people and talking policy. We're doing this on a really short timeline. It was 2 weeks to the convention and then 2 months to the primary. And this is geographically a really big district. So I've been doing a lot of driving. I'm getting in front of every group I can possibly get in front of to talk to. So if you're listening and you haven't heard from me yet, go to my website, reach out to my campaign. I would love to come talk.
Wonderful. And it is the, I think, as far as a challenging district in the state, going from Davis County all the way down to Washington County and that narrow strip. So you are burning up the miles there on I-15 and otherwise, to be sure. But as you do that, it also gives you exposure to really every aspect, I think, of what makes Utah extraordinary. Tell me, what have you learned standing in front of those groups, talking to those groups, listening to those voters?
The biggest thing I've learned is that people are starving for someone who will show up and listen. The voters are, everybody wants to throw talking points at people, and everybody wants to talk about big national issues, and the big national issues are important. But the voters want to be heard on the big national issues, not talked at, and they want someone who also cares about the local issues. We live in a public land state, and our federal government is large, and so everybody has federal involvement in their local issues, and they want representatives who show up for the local issues that have a federal nexus, not just the national issues.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of that program, and I think it's critical too. And you understand this because you've been a staffer in a congressional office, where, yes, as we always say, the hard work and heavy lifting actually gets done when it comes to a lot of those policy discussions. Give us a sense of those policy priorities that you would be looking at if you were to be the representative for the 2nd Congressional District.
Yeah, I everybody from the first day. There are 2 committees that I want to be on, Natural Resources and Armed Services. And the reason I want to be on those 2 committees is that we have a lot of policy issues in the state that are related. Natural Resources is obvious. We have a large salty lake in our state, and we're very limited by water. We have a lot of public land. With regard to armed services, we have big military installations that are very important. Defense-related industry and private businesses that are related to those defense installations, and somebody's got to be looking out for the policy there. And then in addition to that, the thing that gets me excited, the thing that I get really passionate when I talk about, is that we have all of the alphabet soup agencies. They all have a mission, and they all have budgets, and they all want to grow, and they all want to get involved in things they shouldn't be involved in. And I want to be in Congress using the power of the purse to put every agency back into their box that was created by their statutory authority. And I know that makes me nerdy, wonky, but I think that's an advantage in a representative.
Yeah, I do think that's an important one to get back to that. Give us a sense for our listeners in terms of what that might look like. Maybe one of those agencies or an area where you just see that constant expanse or overreach and what it would take to actually get back in that box. We always say it's great to think outside the box as long as you've looked inside the box first.
There are so many examples. A couple of the ones I like to use. One example is I get asked a lot about school curriculum. People are concerned about the federal government telling state and local school boards what they need to be teaching kids. And they're especially concerned things they're hearing will be dictated are things that don't match up with their values. They don't want schools teaching their kids things that they're opposed to. That's an example of the federal government being outside its authority. State and local school boards should be making those decisions. So instead of spending a lot of time talking curriculum, I want to talk about why the federal government is even involved in that discussion, and I think that solves the problem.
Yeah.
And then another example I like to use is the Bureau of Land Management just released a conservation rule. Congress told the BLM to manage public land for multiple use. This conservation rule is the opposite of multiple use. So I want Congress to go in and defund the rule, because if they don't have funding, they can't do anything with it. And all that does is restore the agency to managing the way Congress told them to.
That's a crucial conversation, and we'll dive deep into that on another day. But I think you've hit something that's really crucial in terms of knowing how to navigate and do that. And that's a great example in terms of that overreach or that growth that happens outside of Congress, where an agency suddenly continues to expand, and before you know it, it's the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, and that's not good for farmers and ranchers and the people here in the state of Utah. Give me a sense, as you've been burning up the miles there, Celeste, what has surprised you the most in this whole rapid-fire campaign process in the 2nd Congressional District?
Well, the thing that surprised me the most, and it's a good surprise, is how willing people are to be engaged during a election they didn't expect in the middle of the summer. I mean, July in Utah we've got 2 major holidays and people have family vacations and other things planned, but people are showing up. They're coming to events, they're engaging, they're asking good questions. The delegates were amazing about getting involved and doing their jobs. And I think it's really heartwarming. It restores my faith in the system to see how much people are willing to cancel plans and show up and find out what's at stake in this election.
So important. And final question for you, Celeste, and this is a question I have asked for anyone I've ever interviewed for any office, from a mayor, a county council seat, all the way up to President of the United States. Campaigns are hard, even truncated, short ones. They're exhausting. They can be exasperating. What is it that would make all of this worthwhile, even if you got to Election Day and you didn't win? We know everybody intends to win, but what would make it worth it even if you came up short at the end?
No matter how this election turns out, the sleepless nights and the long days on the road will be worth it if in the end Utah's 2nd Congressional District has a representative who understands the proper role of government and really truly wants to represent the people in this district by showing up, listening, and getting involved with the issues that are important to the constituents.
That's important. Celeste Malloy is running for Congress in Utah's 2nd Congressional District. And again, we're going to continue to watch all of that here on KSL News Radio as things come down. August will be hot and fast and furious besides. Celeste, good luck on the campaign trail. We look forward to having you back as you continue along. Looking forward to that primary and then on to a general election in November. Celeste Malloy, thanks so much for joining us on Inside Sources today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Again, that's Celeste Malloy. Of course, you also have Becky Edwards in that race and Bruce Huff. Those are the three candidates on the Republican side trying to get that nomination. And we're going to continue to track all of those candidates across all of our platforms here at KSL to make sure you have the information you need. It is a big district. It is a vast district in terms of geography and the number of miles you have to travel to be out there amongst the people. And so we applaud all of the candidates in that race because it is a commitment. You have to go from Davis County down to Washington County and a whole lot of places in between. It is not an easy path. And big thanks to Celeste Malloy for joining us from the campaign trail as we continue to follow Utah's 2nd Congressional District special election. All right, we will step aside for some bottom of the hour news, but don't go anywhere. Sherry Dew is going to join us next to discuss the life and legacy of Sister Patricia Holland. Funeral services were today. You don't want to miss this conversation about an extraordinary lady, an extraordinary history, and a lot of things for a lot of us to live up to. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. The chances of experiencing a fatal heart attack go up during times of very high temperatures combined with high air pollution. KSL News Radio's Alessandra Harris has more.
According to a new environmental study in China, high levels of PM 2.5 particle pollution combined with a 4-day heat wave doubles the chances of a fatal heart attack. Here in Utah, PM 2.5 pollution only increases when there are wildfires in the area. And according to the Utah Division of Air Quality, current PM 2.5 pollution levels are relatively low.
Doctors involved in the study say reducing exposure to both extreme temperatures and fine particulate pollution by using air purifiers and staying indoors during the hottest parts of the day could help prevent premature deaths from heart attacks. A wildfire burning near the Utah-Nevada state line right now, just 10% contained. The Bettridge fire currently at 329 acres, no structures threatened there. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Florida governor and 2024 Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is kicking off a weekend of campaigning in Iowa today. He held a town hall event in Oskaloosa to address potential voters on his plans for the economy and more.
We're citizens of a republic. We're not just cogs in the wheel of some global enterprise or some global economy.
President Biden, for his part, was in Maine today talking about the improving U.S. economy. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 175 points on the day, the NASDAQ up 262. And our KSL weather could hardly be any hotter anyway. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. Even though that's an old adage, it's still very true today. And it's especially true of your old 401k. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth asking you to get that old 401k in sight and out of the company you no longer work for. But don't roll it into your new 401k. That could be one of the worst things you do. Of course that's easy. But when has the easiest way ever been the best way? Instead, call Trajan Wealth and learn about all of your options, including a way to earn an upfront bonus of up to 25% for your future income just for rolling it over. That's right. You could earn up to a 25% bonus for your retirement income just for rolling that 401k over with Trajan Wealth. Don't roll that 401k into your new company plan. Don't do it without calling Trajan Wealth first. Call 801-899-7600 or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
You ever notice when someone takes a sip out of a water bottle and they find it to be really good, they always seem to look at the label. Folks just can't help themselves when they take a sip out of a little spring water bottle. Well, there's a reason it's called nature in a bottle. No chemicals, no additives. It's just pure, clean, healthy water from a family-owned and operated bottled water company where that little spring is nestled in a beautiful canyon in Bear Lake, Utah. Now, just imagine the reaction from your customers if your logo was on that recyclable bottle of pure goodness. In the advertising world, they call those impressions. Of course, when you drink Little Spring water, you'll just call it impressive. Let Little Spring Water put your company logo on a bottle and watch what happens. Just visit littlespringwater.com to get a quote. It's actually quite reasonable. littlespringwater.com.
Hey, this is Chris with JCW's. Craving something sweet? We do ice cream right. Come in and try one of our shakes, freezes, or an ice cream cone, and you'll see why we say JCW's, quality, and a lot of it.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Still seeing some slowdowns southbound I-15 from the south interchange to 7200 south in Murray, as well as in the right lane of travel eastbound I-80 in Summit County, approaching the Highway 40 exit. And then if you're going to travel southbound on Highway 40, bogged down due to road work, Jordanelle to River Road. Time to replace your roof. Intermountain West contractors can finish most roofs in one day. Use Radio 1000 and get $1,000 off a roof replacement now. IWCroofing.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, hot and dry through the weekend with a high of 103 on Saturday. Today's high 102. We'll see monsoon moisture moving in starting Monday with cooler temperatures and a chance of rain. 97 degrees right now at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, once in a while and now and then, an extraordinary soul comes along who simply changes the lives of countless individuals and thus changes the world. Sister Patricia Holland was and forever will be just such a soul. She's been a vital voice. She's been an influence for tens of thousands of students and for individuals around the world. And we wanted to get a little behind the scenes. A beautiful, powerful funeral concluded just about an hour ago for Sister Pat Holland, and we're really thrilled to have joining us in studio for some reflection and some insight to have Sherry Dew, of course, the Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Deseret Management Corporation. And Sherry, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Boyd. Nice to be here with you.
A very sweet service, a very powerful service today as her children, just talk about a wow moment. Those children were just absolutely amazing. You knew Sister Holland in a unique way. Give us just a little behind the scenes in terms of how do you capture that life?
Boy, that's a great question, and I don't want to claim any kind of special privilege or any kind of special friendship. I have been privileged to know Sister Holland. I've had the chance to interact with her on many occasions. I was trying to remember when it all began. I remember when her influence began on me. She was the first lady of BYU. After I graduated, which sort of dates me. Now it's not hard to figure out how old I am. But she was the first lady of BYU and also a counselor in the Young Women General Presidency. So we heard her speak a fair amount during a certain season of time. That's when I was sort of a young, being called to different leadership positions in the ward and then in the stake. And she just kept saying things that resonated. So whenever I knew that she was going to speak, I was tuning in and trying to listen, because she would always say something that really touched me, really affected me, made me think more deeply. So that's where my quote-unquote association with her began. Then I think when I first met her is when, as an employee of Deseret Book Company, I approached her and her husband, who was then the president of BYU, about publishing with Deseret Book. So we had several publishing opportunities that came, and then one thing led to another, and then through the years there have been a number of reasons to associate with her. Honestly, her funeral today has to be the most beautiful, powerful funeral I've perhaps ever attended. And I sat there thinking, well, if you want a picture about what she devoted her life to, just listen to her 3 children.
Yeah.
Where would we find 3 children who can more articulately and powerfully give a vision of their mother, but also talk about the influence of their mother?
Yeah.
The other thing I found myself thinking during the funeral was, if you want to take a measure of the influence of a woman, oh my goodness, how would you even start to try to quantify the impact that Pat Holland has had through her life as the First Lady of BYU? And you said this in your introduction. So she influenced tens of thousands of students during the time her husband was the president. They spoke together a lot in what we used to call the Jeff and Pat show.
Yeah.
I think that's where we really got acquainted with her. And then ever since then, at her husband's side and also in her own right, I've heard Elder Holland say she was called to a general office in the church long before anybody thought I had anything to offer. I've heard him say something in a self-deprecating way. My experience with her behind the scenes is that she's just what she appears to be.
Mm-hmm.
She's just what you hope she is.
Yeah, and that's always the thing. Yeah, when you meet someone like that, you're saying, "Oh, I hope they're as good as I think they are." And she's one of those that is that and beyond. We were talking just before we went on air about words. She loved words. She was a reader, and of course, Elder Holland is equally a wordsmith. And yet, I think probably the greatest manifestation of their connection, that tag team show they did at BYU, how many pulpits they've stood together at over the years. But I think the thing to me that gets to the essence is when, especially for Elder Holland, when words actually fail him. And usually it's either when he's sharing his witness or he's talking about his wife, Pat Holland.
Mm-hmm. And some of the children said that today, and then in his tribute, I think if I'm remembering all the beautiful things that were said, that he talked about how hard it was to find the words. I wrote a little tribute to her, and honestly, I didn't know if I should even consider having it be published because it just feels like you can't do her justice. Now, I think it was David Holland, her son, who said, Mother would not want us to paint this glorified picture as though there was something absolutely, that she was larger than life, but she kind of was larger than life. And I just walked out today thinking, oh, Sherry, you can do so much better than you've been doing. You have a long way to go.
I think that's true for a lot that's sat there today, but not in sometimes you walk out of a funeral and you kind of beat yourself up and you're thinking, oh, I am such a loser. And then you come out of a funeral like today and you're inspired to be something better, which I think is the purpose.
Yeah, you want to try a little better. You want to do, and think about it. She just in January, if I'm remembering, she and Elder Holland spoke wasn't it a worldwide young adult devotional?
Mm-hmm.
And she spoke about hope.
Yeah.
Think about it. That wow, it almost seemed she surely didn't know that she didn't have long for this world, but that's one of the words that to me would epitomize her, is always hope. When you're with her behind the scenes, okay, I'm thinking of a time that we went to their home. Oh, this was last year sometime, to do a filming and a podcast for the church news.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know what happens when you start bringing in all the cameras and everything and you just wreck a house.
Yeah.
And she's just happy to have us there. What do you need? Accommodating the videographers, just being absolutely like this. She couldn't have possibly wished that something else could have happened to her that day. And she's got to just be thinking,
what are you doing to my house?
And how long will this take?
Yeah.
and when can I get all of you out of here? Yeah. And yet, no, never. And then to see the two of them start to answer questions, she and Elder Holland, and just finish each other's sentences. One would spark an idea about one statement from a favorite writer, a favorite author, a favorite scripture, a favorite whatever. And the intertwining of their companionship is simply beautiful to observe.
Yeah, that if ever there was the ultimate tag team,
Wow.
I think those two are the epitome of that. And he often spoke emotionally about that connection, and heaven wouldn't be heaven without her. I loved in his comments today and in his tribute that his son Matt Holland read, talked about that idea that they made home feel like heaven, and heaven will feel a heck of a lot like home.
I thought that was absolutely beautiful, and it reminded me of more than once when they would speak together at BYU, and sometimes they were at the pulpit together, sometimes it was sequential, Sister Holland followed by then President Holland. And invariably, he would stand up at the pulpit and say, and he'd be emotional, and say, "She did it again. She did it to me again," and need to pause for a moment or two to collect his emotions and his feelings. Before then, he would, of course, launch in and is such a powerful deliverer of messages that he is, and that he always did. But she affected him, and I think she affected all of us in a beautiful way.
Yeah, so many. We talked about so many of the young people, whether it was through her speaking at a pulpit, her book, and her writing, which was also equally powerful in that heart, that stillness. Give us one more thing in terms of what's something a little under the radar about Sister Holland that's worth just taking a special note of today.
I would say in some quiet moments when there's been a chance to just have a fun conversation about whatever, music. She's a gifted musician.
Yeah.
Turned down a scholarship to Juilliard. Or whether you're talking about music or something gospel-based or something about the family or her children, she had a really adorable sense of humor. Could see the humanity in all of us and laugh at it. Not uproariously, not that sort of thing, but just see the humanity. And so I always left her presence feeling like I want to do better and I can do better. But I never, ever, ever felt judged by her.
Oh.
Never. I never left her presence feeling wanting.
Yeah.
As though, yeah, Sherry, you are pathetic. There are plenty of people I leave feeling that way, but never with her. So she had this way to see the humanity and kind of laugh about it, but also just take a higher road and kind of be inspiring in a very practical, down-to-earth, simple way that always made me want to say, I can do a little better than I'm doing.
Yeah, I love it. I want to dig into that just a little bit more. I often say, there's some people walk into the room, everybody knows they're the smartest person in the room, and everyone leaves feeling a little bit dumber.
And they want you to think they're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, and then some people walk into the room, everyone knows they're the smartest person in the room, but everybody walks out feeling smarter. And having that excitement or that, hey, I can do better. I can be part of this. And Sister Holland clearly had that in a unique way, both in terms of that ability to see humanity, to not judge. And I think that earned empathy, I think that she also had through her own challenges that I think helped create space so that everyone could leave saying, I am going to do a little better today.
I think part of why she was able to do that, it was articulated by her, by one of her sons and her daughter today. Her daughter, Mary Alice, talked about coming home in 7th grade having had a trauma, which in retrospect wasn't much of a trauma, but in the moment was. Yeah, 7th grade trauma. And her mother took her aside and they sat down and they had a prayer together and they talked about it and she made her feel heard. She had a gift for that. Yeah. If you were in her presence, she made you feel that you were heard and that whatever you had to say or to contribute was worth hearing.
Yeah.
So one of her son David talked about a trip to St. George that they made where he was with his mother down there, and every day they went on a hike to a cave, and he spent this week with his mother, not realizing everything she was setting aside because of her busy life to spend that time with him. Those are indicative of things that she did with just regular folk like me that made me feel like my presence was accepted and wanted.
Yeah.
And that she wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And to actually have a conversation. Not just to tell me what she wanted to think. She wanted to have a conversation. She always did that. And I think she had a gift for making anybody in her presence feel like she wanted to hear them.
Yeah, I do think that was an important gift, that ability. I think the most holy thing you can give another person is your presence, and being fully there, and that listening and being seen. And I do think she had a very unique gift for that among so many others. And I think that's why she was so beloved by so many, because even if you just met her once, you felt her presence. She was totally focused on you, 100% in the moment, not looking for the next thing. Super powerful. Extraordinary lessons, an extraordinary lady, Sister Patricia Holland, who passed away last week. Her funeral services were held today at the Conference Center Theater, and will be laid to rest in St. George tomorrow. Sister Sherry Dew, Executive Vice President, Chief Content Officer for Deseret Management Corporation. Grateful for your insight, grateful for your leadership. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Boyd.
We'll step aside for a quick commercial break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
On the way home,
4,000 Utahns with student loans will get a break.
catch up on the day's biggest stories.
Record-setting temperatures plague cities all over the country.
Plus, traffic and weather every 10 minutes on the nines. Get more from your drive with Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News. Weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
MVP's bonus days are back at Lowe's. Find special savings on top brands like DeWalt. Right now, save $60 when you buy a DeWalt impact driver or drill for just $99 each. Plus, MVP's Pro Rewards members will earn 3 times the bonus points when shopping the Pro Zone. Shop in-store and online today. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows pros. DeWalt offer valid 7/17 through 8/2. Bonus points calculated before taxes and fees after applicable discounts, if any. Valid through 7/28. Subject to change.
KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone are counting down to the kickoff of college football with a huge giveaway. This summer, you could win a new travel trailer from Bish's RV. Family owned for 30 years. Bish's RV has always helped RVers go play. And you'll win a pair of BYU season tickets as the Cougars prepare to take on the Big 12. Enter now. Text the word football to 57500 or visit kslsports.com/contests.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, family members and leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints said goodbye to Sister Patricia Terry Holland at a funeral service today. Second, it turns out hot weather and air pollution can combine to increase the risk of a fatal heart attack. Third, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was making a presidential campaign swing through Iowa today. Right now, 97 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Well, it's once again that time of the week where we go a little deeper into presidential politics, rolling into 2024. And as we always say, trying to understand the behavior of someone running for president is like trying to smell the color 7. So we're going to try to smell the color 7 as we look at what all the candidates on both sides of the aisle did in a very busy week on the campaign trail. The president is talking to voters in Maine today. Republicans are descending upon the Hawkeye State in Iowa to talk with voters at a big old barbecue and Lincoln Day dinner there today. There's also a lot of pitching going on and a lot of strikes, a lot of swing and a miss opportunities for many of the candidates who are already struggling a little bit or trying to reset, refocus as we move through the summer. Now, really important, let's start with President Biden. Yesterday, the president delivered a speech regarding mental health in our country and his administration's effort to expand access to mental health care for all citizens.
Our plans would require health insurance plans to identify the gaps in the mental health care that they provide. Right now, many health plans don't collect data. Under my administration's new plan, they would be required to collect that data. And under the existing law, when facts reveal that mental health care is not being treated on par with physical health care, they'd be required by law to fix it. Fix it, fix it, fix it.
I think it's a good message for President Biden. I think some of the things he's done around Bidenomics have been a little contrived and maybe been a little tone deaf in terms of what some of the American people are actually experiencing around the kitchen table or what they're doing in their small businesses. I think mental health is one that does unite the nation, and I think the president's taken some good steps as it relates to close those gaps in terms of access to mental health care. So I think that was a good move by the president and his team. That's a good message for him to be talking about. It's crucial. Everyone needs to talk about that regardless of the presidential politics of it all. Now, let's shift to the Republican side and the nominating process there. Of course, they have a debate coming up. 23rd of August in Milwaukee will be the first Republican debate. Not everyone has qualified to be on that debate stage. This past Sunday, former Vice President Mike Pence, who has yet to qualify, discussed his efforts to get on that first primary debate stage. He is meeting the poll number requirements, but there's a second requirement that the Republican National Committee has put on, which is that you also have to have a number of individual donors to qualify. Here's how former Vice President Mike Pence explained where he is, what they're working on, so he can be on the debate stage on August 23rd.
Well, we make the polling requirement very easily, Dan. I'm very humbled at the support around the country, which is one of the criteria. But yeah, having 40,000 individual donors, we're literally working around the clock. Got about a month to go. I'm confident that we'll be there. We're not offering kickbacks. We're not offering gift cards. We're not even offering soccer tickets. We're just asking people for their support.
And you'll make it.
We'll make it. I'll see you at that debate stage.
All right, you have to hand it to the former vice president. He was able to say, look, we need some help, and we got to keep building momentum. He also was able to take a little shot at some of his Republican counterparts, saying, hey, we're not going to make it on that debate stage by giving stuff away. It's not going to be about tickets to soccer games and gift cards. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way, and we're going to get people to actually support us because they support us, not because they want a gift. So I do give the former vice president credit for that. I think he will make it by the time the deadline arrives, so I think he will end up on the stage for that first debate in Milwaukee on the 23rd. Meanwhile, in the scrambling department, the Ron DeSantis campaign has struggled. They've gone through a couple of series of layoffs. Another 38-plus members of the campaign team were shown the exit sign this past week, really looking at a reset, trying to shake things up just a little bit. As he got into Iowa, he spoke to voters, hoping to revive the campaign with kind of a town hall bus tour approach to things. And he focused heavily on his economic vision and how it counters Bidenomics.
We're going to be rolling out a good economic vision on Monday. I'm going to be in New Hampshire. It's going to be, we're saying we're titling it our Declaration of Economic Independence as Americans, because we need to be independent from the failed elites who have imposed bad policies. We need to be independent from the Chinese Communist Party. We need to be independent from bad energy policy, all these other things. So we're going to lay out all of that. But ultimately, the growth is really significant. So let's do things that will facilitate a growing economy rather than do things to try to kneecap that, which is basically what Bidenomics is all about. Bidenomics is about taking your quality of life and your standard of living and making that less important than his political agenda.
Now, I think there were some important things in there for the governor of Florida to talk about. I think those are important points he should be making as he tries to revive and reset the campaign. One thing from a communication strategy, that's a bad strategy to sort of roll out your punchline and tagline when you're not going to do it until Monday. If you're going to roll it out, go big and be confident. He kind of sort of talked about it, kind of sort of, and that doesn't help him now, and it doesn't help him on Monday when he is actually going to try to roll this out. All right, now one candidate who's been polling surprisingly well is Vivek Ramaswamy. coming from a business background, not a political one, trying to play that outsider. Here's what he had to say about the super PAC influence on the primary and his refusal to take any big donor money.
One of the things that's different from me and every other single candidate in this race is I'm the only one who is not bound by the constraints applied by the mega donor class. This is the super PAC primary, absolutely. I've put in $15+ million already of my hard-earned money precisely because I did not want to take a tin can, ring a hat in hand, and ask a bunch of donors for permission to run, because that comes with constraints. And so this is complicated, but I think the easiest way to lead is through action. Shun the super PAC game and revive actually a race that is about one person, one vote. That was the promise of the American experiment.
So that's Mr. Ramaswamy talking about being the outsider in the race, not taking big money, put in $15 million of his own. So he has put his money where his mouth is, to be sure. One of the interesting trends on the campaign trail this week, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott has jumped up in the polls, getting into the double digits, and definitely has the attention of many of the donor class and many of the establishment class, saying maybe he's a better path. So he's one to watch in the coming weeks as we roll towards that August 23rd debate. Much more to come as we continue to follow the presidential politics of 2024 from both sides of the aisle. That wraps up our special section. Every week we do this, trying to smell the color 7 with those running for president. That wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top of the hour news, but don't go anywhere. We have a really important, really powerful hour number 2 coming up next. Stick around.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. Family members and leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints gathered today to say goodbye to Sister Patricia Terry Holland. The wife of Elder Jeffrey R. Holland of the Quorum of 12 Apostles passed away earlier this week at the age of 81. Reading a statement on behalf of his father, Elder Matthew S. Holland, talked about how she supported her husband in the early years of their 60-year marriage.
At every stop, she made our home a refuge, a place of music, laughter, and love.
Sister Holland was a member of the Young Women's General Presidency, as well as serving with her husband when he was president of Brigham Young University. Burial is set for tomorrow in St. George. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 13 Republican presidential candidates will be gathering this evening for the Iowa GOP Lincoln Dinner in Des Moines. For the first time in that early caucus state, 2 Republican frontrunners will share the same stage. More from ABC's Dave Packer.
Former President Trump, leading in Iowa polls, has made few appearances with other GOP candidates. This evening's Lincoln Dinner in Des Moines will give voters a chance to see him among 13 other Republicans vying for the nomination, including number 2 polling Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Each candidate will have 10 minutes to address the crowd.
And your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average at near the close of trading, 176 points up on the day. The NASDAQ is up 266 points. And our KSL weather, hot today and hotter tomorrow. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hey, life doesn't stop when cancer starts. After diagnosis, treatment is vital. But for some, just getting there, to appointments, chemo, or radiation, is a major challenge. You can change that. Volunteer to give rides with the American Cancer Society Road to Recovery program. Driving for a few hours of your day can make a life-saving difference for someone with cancer. Visit cancer.org/drive to learn more.
Here's a question. Do you wear dentures? At Grandpa's Dental, you can trade in your floppy dentures and get $2,000 towards an implant-supported solution. You know, they say the older you get, the more you need your teeth. Well, chewing your food isn't a luxury. And taking a bite out of a nice, juicy steak, well, it takes teeth. At Grandpa's Dental, they have over 10,000 restorations under their belt, and it's always affordable. When you walk into one of their 3 locations, you're family, period. At Grandpa's Dental, they live their family legacy by building lasting relationships through state-of-the-art services. So if you want to stop the flop and actually eat foods you can chew, trade in your dentures at Grandpa's Dental for $2,000 toward your implant solution. Schedule your free consultation at grandpasdental.com today. That's grandpasdental.com.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Emergency crews have responded to an auto pedestrian crash with possible injuries. 3rd West, just south of 1300 South. They may have been able to get that moved off the roadway. And a crash called out at 3rd East and 2700 South. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, and wildlife, along with excellent dining and shopping, await you. Find out more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, hot and dry through the weekend. Today's high 102, 103 on Saturday. Then we'll see monsoon moisture moving in starting on Monday with cooler temperatures and a chance of rain. Right now we're at 98 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, nobody likes to feel pain. In fact, most of us spend a lot of time in our lives trying to avoid it at any and all costs. The question beyond the headlines is, have politics and some public policy taken the prevention of pain too far? Is no pain really the end goal? And what happens if we eliminate human suffering from life? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
I'm really excited for this Think Again moment on a Friday to slow things down just a little bit, take a little different perspective in terms of where we are, and just a brilliant piece at Deseret.com about the problem of pain. Scott Rains is a writer and doctoral student at the University of Kansas, wrote a brilliant piece that everybody should read over the weekend. And Scott, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, so much of what we see today is this whole idea of we got to eliminate pain from all the different parts of our lives. Give us a little sense of what you saw and what really sparked you to really go down this path in terms of what is pain all about, and is eliminating it really the right goal?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of it's a more political piece than I usually write. But many people can't answer the question, if you're progressive, what is it that you're progressing towards? Or if you're conservative, what is it that you want to conserve, right? And I mean, most conservatives, sadly, they want to conserve their bank accounts, and it's ineffective. It's terribly ineffective for any kind of progress that we actually need. But there's a problem among many of the progressive philosophers that there's this inherent moral the highest moral good is to eliminate all human suffering, and fundamentally, it's an illusion.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to get at. So you cited some really interesting people who are thinking down that path, kind of getting rid of all of those unpleasant experiences. That's what we should do? So kind of take us down that path a little bit. Is that the idea that we should or that we could eradicate all pain?
Right. In the article I cite philosopher David Pearce, who in 1995, he founded what's called the hedonist imperative. And hedonism is the philosophy that you should engage and pursue all pleasure in life to any extent and to all chaos. And he also founded the Abolitionist Project, and he's the one that said that the last human moment of suffering will be a datable event, as if human suffering is, for sure going to be ended in some future date. There's another philosopher named Sam Harris who's maybe more known, recognized name, and he says that pain, 99% of pain, can be eliminated in the mind alone. And he conveniently has this app that you can download, and it costs $120 a year, and he could teach you how to eliminate pain. But C.S. Lewis has this beautiful book called The Problem of Pain, where he addresses the truth that pain is an essential part that lets us be real, lets us be alive, and lets us experience the world.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part. I want to come back to Lewis in just a second. And you're very clear in your piece that, look, of course, we're trying to eradicate and alleviate where possible human suffering, unnecessary, and famines and disease and all those things. Of course, we're going down that path. But if you take that to the ultimate end, if that becomes the end, you go into this great thing of talking about if all we're doing is either numbing ourselves, with medication so we don't feel pain or discomfort, or so we can just go play video games, we sort of lose the real test, which is around meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another philosopher, Yuval Noah Harari, who he claims that computers in the future will be so efficient that he says there will be an excess of humanity, and he put excess in quotes, and he says there'll be nothing else that we can do except just give people drugs and let them play video games. And it's a fundamentally anti-human view that I think is really dangerous, that way too many people just kind of take as given. And but part of that problem is being a human being is painful. Dealing with other human beings that have needs is painful. So if we can just pretend they don't exist and put them in a factory where they take drugs and play games all day, then that solves our problem. We don't have to feel the pain of being our brother's keeper, so to say.
Yeah, such an important thing. So dig into us just a little bit more with C.S. Lewis and explain that problem with pain, and then how we actually begin to apply that here in 2023.
Yeah. So C.S. Lewis, of course, is the great Christian apologist. He was no stranger to pain, right? He served for the British Army in the Great War, or the First World War. He was in the trenches on the front lines in France as a young man. I think he was in his late teens, early 20s. And he was very familiar with pain and what that entails, and the fact that pain gave him meaning in life. And he has another great book called Surprised by Joy. Joy was the name of his wife, and it talks about her passing and simultaneously his conversion to Christianity. And death, gives meaning to someone's life. If someone lives forever in this life, it's like a painting. You have to have a frame around a painting, otherwise it just never ends. And the frame gives meaning to that painting. And death functions in a very similar way. We die, to give an end to this life, and that's one of the parts that makes it beautiful and meaningful and painful. But that pain gives it meaning at the same time. It's kind of it's a paradox, but
yeah, it is. It's that we always talk about it in the context of gratitude and grief. That grief is the great revealer of what you cherish, what had meaning and substance, and so you actually end up having gratitude in that grief. Because it means you actually loved or actually lived or actually learned something. I think that's an important part of all of that. As we bring it full circle, give us a sense. You had another quote from Lewis in there, and talked about this idea that if we completely avoid pain, that actually can become a vice in and of itself. Give us a sense of that.
Right. He has this other great quote. The book is called "The Problem of Pain." And in the book, he makes a theological comment that we would much prefer to have a grandfather in heaven as opposed to a father in heaven, because grandpa in heaven will give us all the candy and all the treats that we want. And, he'll when our parents are mean to us, we can go stay at his house and everything. But, a father in heaven would require he would see something in us as a father does and discipline us towards something that we're capable of. And I think that was Lewis's point, one of his many points. It's a fantastic book. It's probably more relevant today than it was when he wrote it. But
yeah, powerful stuff. Scott Rains, a writer, doctoral student at the University of Kansas. Great piece at Deseret.com. You should check that out today. It'll get you thinking and thinking again as you roll into your weekend. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Boyd.
Great insight there, and so many different avenues you can go down. But so often I find in our society that everything we're talking about is to end all suffering, all pain, all stretching. We don't want our kids to fail. We don't want them to struggle. And so often we go to these incredible lengths to make sure that doesn't happen. And that limits learning, it limits growth, and it actually limits joy. So when it comes to pain, I think one of my other favorites from C.S. Lewis is God is like the dentist. And sometimes there is a little pain in that process, but there's always learning, and that leads to meaning. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Why do people call KSL Utah's news, traffic, and weather station? Well, every day you get a ton of news.
The U.S. economy beat expectations.
A road rage encounter was caught on video.
Some elementary schools forced to close.
You also hear important traffic updates.
Right lanes blocked due to road repair.
And reliable weather.
Triple digits through Sunday, hot weekend.
Use this radio station for all of it. We're KSL News Radio on every smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. It's no secret that mortgage rates have risen from historic lows over the last few years. In some cases, having a low mortgage rate can also act as so-called golden handcuffs when homeowners don't want to refinance and lose their rate. One solution to this is a home equity line of credit, or HELOC. HELOCs have higher rate than first mortgages, but they offer flexibility as they are a credit line that can be tapped into as needed. This is a way to take care of financial matters such as debt consolidation, home improvements, medical or college bills, or whatever without losing your current mortgage rate. And when rates come back down, you can refi and take out the HELOC. Call us if this is something you'd like to explore. Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com. NMLS 289115.
Back in the day, a shoemaker was called a cobbler because the stone you walked on was called cobblestone. Or was it the other way around? But before you can walk on cobblestone, you have to lay it down. Of course, you can also use cobblestone in your garden or park strips, or, well, you get the idea. But where do you get good old-fashioned cobblestone? The dirt bag. Imagine the things you can do with it in your yard and garden. If you have an imagination, the dirt bag has what you need to bring that dream to life. Rock mulch? How about 11 different rock mulches? Playground chips for the kids? Yep, the dirt bag. For topsoil, sod, bark mulches, and pathway material called chat, the dirt bag. And with a dirt bag, your garden and yard you have in your imagination can be delivered right to your driveway. Or you can pick it up in bulk yourself. There's a reason everyone loves the Dirt Bag. Find out what the Dirt Bag can do for you at thedirtbag.com. Thedirtbag.com.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
I'm Andy Farnsworth from KSL News Radio.
And I'm Kellyanne Halverson.
And we're hosts of KSL's Fan Effect podcast.
That's Fan Effect with an E.
We're excited to share with you our knowledge
and arguments
on everything pop culture and fandom, featuring movie and television reviews, pop culture deep dives into video games, cosplay, fandom events, and more. Listen regularly on your favorite podcast platform at KSLNewsRadio.com, KSLPodcasts.com, or on the KSL News Radio app.
And remember, that's Fan Effect with an E.
Dave and Debbie.
One of my favorite things about Debbie is when we're in the middle of an interview, a light flips on and there's something that she picked out. I call it her spidey sense. And then she just tenaciously goes after that line of questioning. If someone tries to spin it, she's respectful, but she's firm. And she won't let you go with just that easy, trite answer. She's going to get down to the bottom of it, and I love it.
I've always been impressed with Dave's ability to go back in his memory bank and drag out factual details from previous interviews, weeks, months, even years ago. It is phenomenal to watch that happen because it adds so much context to our coverage in the moment. Dave's got it all right up here in his brain, and that's impressive.
This is a thing that Debbie does not do well. On-the-fly math.
I agree. So one thing I agree with him on.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
You know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
Yeah, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, anything, you need to tell an adult, someone you know and trust. That can be hard, but speaking up about a problem is what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, Sister Patricia Terry Holland was remembered as a mother, a musician, and the eternal companion of Elder Jeffrey R. Holland of the Quorum of 12 Apostles at a funeral service earlier today. Second, artificial intelligence programs are being accused of plagiarism more often these days. And third, 13 Republican presidential candidates will be attending an event in Iowa tonight. Right now, 98 degrees in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
As we covered in our presidential politics segment last hour, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is hot on the campaign trail in Iowa, as is everyone else today. They're all descending on the Hawkeye state. DeSantis, though, has been experiencing some decline in both the poll numbers and the funding. He arrived in Iowa not just with a new message, trying to hit the reset button, also dealing with some staff shakeups. So we wanted to look at why this is happening, what the message needs to be, what tweaks are likely to happen as they march their way towards August 23rd in the first Republican debate. To help us get behind the headlines and into what really goes on in a political campaign, David Drucker, of course, the senior writer for the Dispatch, and had a great piece on the DeSantis campaign and kind of the summer swoon that they seem to be experiencing. David, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks, Boyd.
So as you're out and about and keeping your ear to the ground on all of this, of course, let's start with the shakeup in terms of the campaign. Give us a sense of why the shakeup and why now.
Well, he couldn't afford the campaign that he had built. So first and foremost, whether or not it was going to work is one thing. But when you're not raising enough money to support a business, you either have to cut or fold. And he did not have the revenue to support the employees. And so that's one reason that he had to cut. The other thing is clearly he's still in second place. He's far behind Donald Trump. And so there was not the impetus on the part of donors to write a bunch of checks to get him where he needs to be. And he's still raising a decent amount of money, but it just wasn't enough. So when you combine the fact that you're not the front runner, you're not raising the kind of money to get the to keep the operation going, he had no choice but to engage in a shakeup.
Yeah.
And I also think, Boyd, that this is indicative of the fact that messaging-wise, he was sort of fumbling around. It's not that any particular thing he said was necessarily horrible or fatal. It was just the fact that there didn't seem to be a coherent strategy for putting together a coalition that could outpace Trump by the time the voting starts.
Yeah, and let's dig into that just a little bit in terms of the messaging. I was a little leery early on, saying, okay, this is very Florida-centric, and it's why it's important to tout what you've done. It seemed like that kind of became the mantra, and I think that got a little tired a little quickly. And so now he's making this pivot, and I thought he did a little bit today in Iowa, and he sort of, kind of previewed what he's sort of, kind of going to do on Monday with a sort of, kind of new messaging strategy. It seemed a little ham-fisted and a little off.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'd put it this way, right? Because there are a million things he says that are fine, and then there's some things or a million things he says that are questionable. But I would try and sort of explain what I think he needs to do in this way, and I still think he has a really good opportunity in Iowa.
Yeah.
If he can hang around, and it's this: he's not going to supplant Trump with the Trump base. And so what he needs to do is figure out, okay, how do I win? What parts of the party do all those voters come from? Well, some of them will come from the Trump base, but not all of them. And then some of them are going to come from other candidates. And if I'm getting voters that are looking at other candidates, it probably means they're already not looking at Trump. And so he has to, look, he can only be who he is and be true to himself. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. But if you're running against Trump, who's at 50% or above, the way you're going to have a chance to beat him is put together all of those voters that are voting for somebody else.
Yeah.
And then you take a few from the Trump base, and you've got a winner. And so he needs a message that doesn't just appeal to the Republican base, but to regular Republican primary voters that are not interested necessarily in Trump. He's got to give them. And that's more than just talking about cultural issues and fighting against woke and things like that. It's focusing on a whole host of things that these voters want to see. And also, when you're asked questions about, Trump's alleged illegality, Trump's, alleged law breaking. Unless you just think the guy did nothing wrong and he's totally getting railroaded, maybe you ought to say, instead of, indicating like he did to Megyn Kelly in a clip that was released that, he would pardon Trump because it would help the country move on, and he compared it to Ford Nixon, not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but maybe he should say, well, let's see if he's convicted.
Yeah.
Let's see what he's convicted for. Let's see what the evidence shows. Let's see if he's contrite. At least show that try and show voters concerned about Trump's actions that you feel their pain as well as those voters who feel like Trump's getting railroaded. And I feel like, he's erring too much on the side of the Trump voter when he's going to need a lot more than the Trump voter, because a lot of the Trump voters won't leave Trump.
Right. That's such an important point because, again, as you look at the numbers and you look at the process in terms of getting delegates, that's how you win this thing. There are a segment of those that are supporting the former president that are not going anywhere, no way, no how, never. And so those aren't the ones you're trying to appease. It's a lot of those that are more in the middle component to that like the policies, maybe are tired of some of the drama. And the way you do that, I think, is what you said, is that you show some restraint and say, well, let's let it play out. Let's see what actually happens, rather than trying to be either instantly certain, which some of the candidates have done, or so incredibly passive, as some have tried to do, that you end up in this nowhere land, and then you've just offended everybody, and then you have no chance at building a coalition.
Yeah, I think, he should take a page from his own book. And if you look at Ron DeSantis when he spars with mainstream media reporters who question his agenda, and a lot of things he's done in Florida, he'll snap at them, but I don't even mean that pejoratively or in a negative way. Yesterday he was asked about the African-American history curriculum in Florida, and he was asked a tough question. It was a fair question, but he's like, have you read it? And he just said, have you read it? And finally the reporter says, no, I haven't. Well, maybe you ought to read it. I think when he gets some of these questions about Trump, he ought to be willing to answer the same way. Listen, he shouldn't be so quick to try and appease people. Right. I mean, that is what his Robert F. Kennedy Jr. comments appeared to be. He's asked by a friendly conservative talk radio host, Clay Travis, hey, would you pick RFK Jr. To be your vice president? RFK Jr. these days, as you know, is popular with a segment of the Republican base. And, instead of, he said, of course, no, but I'd stick him on, quote, I'd stick him, I'd maybe put him to work at the FDA or the CDC. Maybe he ought to say, listen, I'm not picking any liberal Democrats for my administration who are, pro-choice and, don't believe in Second Amendment rights. There are plenty of good Republicans to choose from. I mean, maybe what he ought to say is this guy's a conspiratorial nut who doesn't believe in any vaccines. My issue was with pushing the COVID vaccine, which was rushed and unproven, and they were trying to force people to do it in a way that I felt was unfair given it had no track record. I mean, there are lots of ways. That's one way. But at least he could have said, hey, I don't need to pick some Democrat when I got plenty of good Republicans to choose from, right? Yeah. But instead, it's almost like he wanted to appease this attraction to RFK Jr. by some in the base, and so he comes up with a way to say, sure, I'll let him come work for me. I mean, those are the kinds of things I think he needs to correct.
Yeah, absolutely. David Drucker, senior writer for the Dispatch, always a great perspective there. Today focused on Ron DeSantis. We'll continue to tap in to David as the campaign rolls on. We'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Don't go anywhere. Megan McCardle from the Washington Post is going to join us coming up next. Stick around.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. And we have breaking news. A motorcyclist in critical condition after a crash with a UTA shuttle near 2300 South and Redwood Road. That intersection is currently closed. The driver of that motorcycle has been taken to the hospital. A Utah lawmaker says he's working on a new bill to keep sexuality, politics, and religion from being taught in Utah classrooms.
It's not my goal to push one style of ideology or one belief system over another. My goal is to keep advocacy of belief systems out of the classroom, not to push a particular belief system.
Draper Representative Jeff Stenquist scrapped a bill last year that would have prevented teaching or discussion on sexual orientation or gender identity. No text of this new bill yet. Educators worry this sends a message that teachers are out there promoting political agendas in schools. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Vice President Harris was in Iowa today, promising to make abortion a major issue in the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign. ABC's Andy Field has the latest.
Vice President Kamala Harris going after states, including Iowa, that are working toward a nearly total ban on abortion, some for even rape and incest victims.
She doesn't have the authority or right to make a decision about what happens to her body next. That's immoral.
Harris telling Iowa voters that the only way to guarantee women's reproductive rights is to vote out lawmakers trying to take them away. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 176 points today at the end of trading. The NASDAQ was up 266 points. The S&P 500 up 44. And coming up, looks like our weather is just going to be hot today and tomorrow. Then maybe next week it'll cool off. That's next. KSL News Time 232.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Can we talk about something difficult to discuss? Are you going through a difficult financial time? You have equity in your home, but nobody can help. I'm Jason Erskine with American Home Loans, and we have created the Bridge Loan Program to use your equity regardless of your credit at this time. The bridge loan can be used to pay debts, collections, IRS liens, divorce settlement, or just simply improve your property. Give us a call at 801-262-2221. This loan creates a bridge between now and a much brighter future. During COVID, one of our clients had over $85,000 on credit cards. Their scores were too low to borrow on their home. We were able to save them $2,000 a month, and after 8 months, they qualified for a conventional loan and improved their situation. Look, the consultation is free. Please let us see what we can do for you. Call 801-262-2221. That's 801-262-2221, or go to AmericanHomeLoans.com. That's AmericanHomeLoans.com.
NMLS 245422, Equal Housing Lender.
At Intermountain Primary Children's Hospital, we made a bold promise to build the nation's model health system for children. Join us in realizing our vision for the future of pediatric care. So together, we can expand primary children's impact and ensure every child has access to the right care at the right place at the right time. For a century, Primary Children's has kept the child first and always. Help us continue to do so for the next 100 years. To get involved, visit primarypromise.org.
Dave and Dujanovic.
One of the best ways to get listeners involved in the conversation is to have a clear opinion.
Listener participation. We invite phone calls all the time, and Dave and we're learning things from them too.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful when Mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. I wanted a better relationship with Dad, so I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Valley Freeway traffic looking good. We do have the intersection blocked off with traffic diverted due to that motorcycle crash in West Valley, Redwood Road, about 2300 South, and an accident called out 90th South, 2700 West. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, hot and dry through the weekend with a high of 103 on Saturday. Today's high 102. We'll see monsoon moisture moving in starting Monday with cooler temperatures and a chance of rain. And right now, 99 degrees at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
I've been waiting for this conversation all day. Made me chuckle, but it also made me think about a whole host of things. Megan McArdle, of course, is a Washington Post columnist, has a great piece in the Washington Post today with the title, "Want a Lazy Girl Job? Think Again." And, of course, we're always about the think again moments beyond the headline. And, Megan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, as always.
So, for our listeners who didn't wake up on the socials, who are not in the middle of the TikTok craze, give us a sense. What is a lazy girl job?
Well, that's actually somewhat vague, as with many social media. Basically, the idea is that you have a job that doesn't demand too much of you so that you can put your real energies somewhere outside of work. So ideally it is remote. It doesn't have set hours. It's not too emotionally demanding. You have clear boundaries with your manager, so they never ask you to do extra work. You can kind of get your duties done, and then you're done for the day, and no one asks where you are. Obviously, this sounds pretty good.
Sounds great, yeah.
And as a former lazy girl myself, I certainly I resonate with the instinct there. And I should also confess, I've been working remotely since 2007. That said, when I was working remotely, I had a manager who wanted me to come into morning meetings. And I was like, look, that's great, but I'm working 12 hours a day already. So if I add 2 hours of commute, I'm taking 2 hours off of my work day. It was like, enjoy remote work.
Yeah.
I use that time to mostly do extra work. No, I'm not saying that shouldn't be for everyone, right? My work habits were extreme, but at my peak, I was writing 15,000 to 20,000 words a week, and I think that was probably unhealthy for me. But, there's a lot of space in there between no work-life balance and all I think about is how little I can do for the maximum amount of money and freedom. And, it's not so much about valorizing work, although I think work is actually really important. It makes not necessarily work outside the home. Obviously, people who are home taking care of children are doing important work as well, harder work than what I do. But when you are not taking care of family members or doing something else that's kind of essential community work, work gives you structure to your days. It makes you know that you are making a contribution to society as well as taking out. And I think when we look at communities where people aren't working that hard, they're actually not that great. They're not great places to live. Places that are mostly disability and so forth. Having work in a community as well as in your life, I think, is structuring. But the other thing I would say, and what I focused on in the column, is that these precise kinds of jobs, these fantastic jobs that don't require much and let you work remote and pay pretty well, those are probably the most likely to go in a recession. They're vulnerable to AI. A lot of these are kind of lower level communications jobs, marketing associate, data analyst, and so forth. These are things that ChatGPT is already doing kind of surprisingly well. So that's one problem. Another problem is that in a recession, who's your boss going to fire?
Right.
It's the person who's the second worst person on the team is the influencer who popularized this term, suggested you should aspire to be. It is the remote worker they've never met and they don't really have any personal feelings about. It's the person who is kind of quiet quit. Those people are really vulnerable. And I think for young people for whom this has taken off, they've never known a job market that didn't have more jobs than people. Yeah. Those of us who are a little older have seen industries change so that once good, very secure, stable jobs go away, and have also watched, the economy itself fluctuate. Understand that you don't necessarily want to be in a position where, if your job is that disposable to you, you might be that disposable to your boss.
Those are all such important points. I want to dig into a couple of those and really look at this idea of when I read it in your column, be the second worst person on your team. So you're not the first one fired. You're just under the radar. You're still getting your paycheck. And we actually had a conversation earlier in our show today talking about this incredible pursuit of avoiding pain or suffering or struggle. And all the things that we do to do that, and that you end up either numbing yourself and playing video games, or you're kind of doing the lazy girl job where you're just doing the minimum standard. But there's also something that happens in that, and you alluded to it. And I'd love for you to dig in for this, Megan, in terms of that meaning that comes from work, and then also that connectedness, that interaction with other people that also brings meaning in that process as well.
Yeah, I think something that I really appreciate a lot more as I'm older now, I just turned 50 this year, is that my best friends are not the people who are the most entertaining or necessarily the most fun person I knew when I was 20. It's the people who stuck in the long term. It's the people I see regularly. It's the people that you have these ongoing connections with of just like presence. And I think one of the reasons that you may have noticed that it's actually really hard when you think about your spouse or your parents or your siblings describing why you love them. It's actually really difficult, even though they have many fine qualities. But like lots of people have those fine qualities, what it really boils down to is all of this shared experience you have, this shared personal connection that happened online in real time. And I think, this actually ties into your other question, because I think something that I worry about with younger people, and I worry about, by the way, with myself as well, this is not just old fogey shake this guy, is that like social media, the internet and so forth have given us the idea that we're just supposed to be entertained nonstop. Yeah. That we are supposed to, that everything is supposed to be this marvelous journey of self-actualization, of making the perfect Instagram moment. And I think you get to my age and you look back and you realize that it's not the most photographable moments of your life that meant the most. And that the constant like focusing on me and the self-actualization actually was not the stuff that brought you the most meaning and joy. It was the kind of hard, dirty work, whether that's with kids or parents or a job. It was actually the hours that you put in doing stuff that you actually kind of wished you weren't doing at the time that you look back later and you realize that's when I made myself who I am and who I want to be.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important concept for all of us. And you said not just for the young kids to get off our lawn.
Indeed.
Because we walked, uphill both ways in the snow to get to school or to get to the job. But I think you touched on such an important piece there, Megan, in terms of that meaning. I used to always say, I wish God would quit blessing us and just send me an easy day and an easy job. But it's or easy children. Maybe that was the real essence of all of that. But I love the way you frame that in terms of it is that staying power. It's going through the hard stuff. Life is messy. Families are messy. Relationships are messy. Jobs are messy. But it's in navigating that we actually find that higher meaning. And we also get to contribute and actually make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think God wants more from us than to be entertained.
Yeah.
Which is, I often regret that, honestly. God, I could use a few more really good premium TV shows.
Yeah.
But actually, no, but we do too. At the end of the day, we look back, and this is the thing that I think, when you're young, you're 25, you have these kind of fantasies about what your future will be. And what you understand on the other side of a lot of bruises is that it wasn't like the stuff you planned, and it was being able to stick with the stuff. And also it was banking stuff for later.
Yeah.
It was not the instant gratification of this is what I want to do right now. It was that I did a bunch of stuff and thinking about who your future self is. The quote from my column that I love, and I was really fortunate. I had already actually written most of this column, and then I went out to lunch with an entrepreneur friend of mine who I started talking about this with him, and he gave me the quote that I closed the column with, which was, "Be kind to yourself, because if you aren't, no one else will. Be kind to your future self, because if you aren't, no one else will be." And I just think that is so, sorry, of course I immediately hash it, but be kind to your future self, I think is such an important concept. And it's one that I worry that gets lost in this idea of having the perfect Instagrammable life.
Yeah. Great insight as always. Megan McArdle, Washington Post columnist. The title of today's piece, Want a Lazy Girl Job? Think again. It's the ultimate think again moment. And Megan, we appreciate you always helping us think again about a whole host of things. A great insight as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Love Megan McArdle, great writer, incredible thinker, always taking it just a little bit deeper. Always appreciate that. We'll step aside for one last break. When we come back, some final thoughts on a Friday here on Inside Sources. We'll be right back.
Go with your gut. Your dog's immune system is based in the gut. A diet lacking in nutrients can cause itching, scratching, and a weak immune system. However, there is a solution. DINOVITE. Dinovite.
It took a grand total of 2 weeks. The dog stopped itching, the hair stopped falling out.
Try Dinovite for free. Just pay shipping and handling. Learn more at dinovite.com/radio.
Happier, healthier with every bite. Over 1 million pets helped with Dinovite.
At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. Introducing 24/7 LifeGuard protection, only from SimpliSafe Home Security. Now, monitoring agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplisafe.com/radio. Advanced home security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like SimpliSafe.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance. For your free quote, call SelectQuote at 1-800-330-1991. That's 1-800-330-1991. Or go to SelectQuote.com. That's 1-800-330-1991. SelectQuote. We shop, you save. Full details on example policies at selectquote.com/commercials.
The Salt Lake Chamber is Utah's voice for business. Okay, that sounds great, but what does it really mean? Well, as Utah's largest and longest-standing business association, they support and champion community prosperity throughout the state. And if you're in business, well, that's a very good thing for you. Be sure to listen to the Chamber's Speaking on Business, weekdays at 7:20, 11:55, and 5:20 p.m. on KSL News Radio.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
We're going abroad for the first time in years, to Spain. So we started using Babbel.
And started learning Spanish fast.
With Babbel, you can start having conversations in another language in just 3 weeks.
¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas?
When you learn a language, you want to actually use it. Babbel is designed with that goal in mind.
In just 3 weeks, we're starting to have conversations in Spanish. Gracias, Babbel.
Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free at Babbel.com. That's Babbel.com.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a motorcycle rider was critically injured in a crash with a UTA shuttle this afternoon. Second, a state legislator is promising to bring back a bill that puts limits on discussions of sexuality in Utah schools. And third, the vice president promising to make access to abortion a major campaign issue in next year's presidential campaign. Right now, 99 degrees in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It is great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, I want to give you a little heads up. On Sunday morning, on our friends over at KSL TV, is Sunday Edition, which I happen to be hosting now. And I want to give you a little heads up of an interview I did with the great George Will. Of course, George Will, longtime award-winning columnist for the Washington Post. This is someone who cranks out 2 columns a week, 50 weeks a year. He's been doing it for almost 50 years. And his wordsmithing, his ability to look at social issues, political issues, international issues, has always inspired me, and it was great we had him on the program. And so that'll air on KSL TV at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. So make that a part of your Sunday morning. I have an extended conversation with Mr. George Will, but I want to share just a little sneak peek of that so you can get a taste, a little feel and flavor for where we're going to head on Sunday on KSL TV. I asked Mr. Will about how do we actually get beyond this quick hit, hot take, instantly certain social media approach to the world that often keeps us a safe distance from actually having real conversations about real problems. Here's what Mr. Will had to say.
I write 100 columns a year, 750 words apiece. You can do an awful lot in 750 words. You can't do an awful lot in 240 characters except be enraged. Social media, by its very brevity and its instantaneous distribution, encourages extremism, vituperation, and rage. Reading requires attention. It requires sustained attention. It requires something more than a few characters attention span. So we have to get people back to this. We have to get them to turn off talk radio, shut down cable television. The good news, Boyd, is that there are 333 million people in this country, and at any given moment, 325 million of them are not watching cable television, and they're not listening to talk radio. They're getting on with life, which is why we can isolate and quarantine the fanatical fringe.
Well, of course, this talk radio accepted. He was very clear about that. Because we're always talking about how do we elevate that conversation. But I love the way he framed that because, of course, what Mr. Will's talking about is the rage. And it's what we try to do every day, separate the rage from the reason and isolate, quarantine off the fanatical fringe of left and right so that we can have a different kind of conversation. Because the problem and where the conversation went with Mr. Will was, what do we do? How do we do that? Because it makes us so short-sighted. It makes us so obsessed with instant gratification, the immediacy of now, and it keeps us all exhausted. You've heard me say it on this show before. I tell individuals, I tell organizational leaders, I tell government officials, you're going to run out of energy before you run out of opportunity. And I actually love what sociologist Elise Boulding had to say about it. She said it this way. If one is mentally out of breath all the time from dealing with the present, there is no energy left for imagining the future. And I think we find that in so many different aspects of life that people are so exhausted with the instant certainty of the moment that we have no energy left to imagine the future. And this is the kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly being out of breath over the present. It inhibits deep thinking. It inhibits forward thinking, visionary thinking. So a national media that breathlessly reports on every angry tweet, every angst-filled comment, every divisive political comment can't possibly create a space where citizens can actually imagine the future or what we do to create that future. We've got politicians on both sides of the political aisle who can't see past their own reelection. And if they can't see past their own reelection, there's no way that they have attention that can focus on the issues that are going to impact the next generation or the generation after that. In fact, I'm convinced those same performative politicians who breathlessly strive to create their social media moment, to propel their popularity, to raise their campaign cash, to weaponize the words of anyone who opposes them in any way, they got zero energy to find common ground. They have no energy to build a better, more united future. But now let's look at it from an individual standpoint. I know individuals who are so obsessed with social media and the need to rapidly reply with the most pithy and biting response to anybody who dares to disagree with them. Those people never have energy for an elevated conversation. They never have time to actually do the things that would improve or better a relationship. They just don't. And as a society that is so obsessed with differences, a society so obsessed with division, keeps itself exhausted and a very safe distance from applying the principles that could actually shape or reimagine the future. So think about that. Let's go full circle. If one is mentally always out of breath from dealing with the present, there is no energy left for imagining or reimagining the future. And that's what we have to get. If we want a better future, we have to have a different kind of conversation today. And we can't do that if we're perpetually exhausted? When I was chief of staff, it was one of the most interesting things that I saw deployed by the leadership of both the Democrats and the Republicans. Because part of their strategy, in order to better control their caucuses, was to always have them running around chasing shiny objects, arguments that didn't matter, so that they would be exhausted. Because the leaders of both political parties in the House and in the Senate knew if their members are exhausted, they'll do what they're told in the end. The easiest thing for those leaders to do is to go through some process so that we end up on the floor of the House or on the floor of the Senate in the middle of the night taking votes. Or right before it's time to leave for, I don't know, the August recess, when the jet fumes from Reagan National are wafting their way towards the Capitol and everybody's exhausted, it's really easy for the leaders of both parties to go over and say, hey, just vote this way and we'll be done and you can go catch that plane and go home. Or, I know you're all exhausted. I know we've been here all day doing the job we were actually elected to do, but I know you're really exhausted by all of this and it's the middle of the night. So rather than take some hard votes and to keep trying to work through this process, just take the easy vote and we can all go home. You run out of energy long before you run out of opportunity. And if we're always out of breath because we're having fake fights and false choices, we have no energy left to imagine or reimagine what the future could be. And to me, that's the ultimate test for all of us. I love the old proverb, a society grows great when old men and women plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in. Imagining the future, really imagining the future individually, as family, neighborhood, community, country. Imagining the future begins by having enough energy. And the way you have enough energy is by focusing on crucial conversations, essential conversations today. Well, that wraps it up for Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. And as always, as you go out into the world today,